Hi friends, welcome to the next session on developing REST API using Python Flask. This is session 2 and this is your Santosh Avalamurthy. So today we are going to see the implementation of post method using Python Flask along with the database interaction. So there is a lot of things to learn in this particular tutorial. You're not only going to learn how to implement post method, but also you'll be knowing how to interact with database in Python. So if you are not subscribed to my channel, do subscribe to the channel to get notifications on all my videos. So there are plenty of videos which are going to come in the future. So don't miss any of my video. Do subscribe and also share my videos so that others can also subscribe and get benefit from these videos. So for this session, there are certain prerequisites. So one is you should have a database installed either on your machine or you should have access to the database in other machine. So you should have a user ID password to the database with the permission to create a record and availability of PyODBC library. So PyODBC library is used to interact with the database using the ODBC connection. So if you don't have the library installed on your system, do install it by using the command pip install pyodbc. Pip space install space pyodbc. So for this session, I am using a table called student underscore details, and here is the structure of the table as well as the command to create the sequence. So I have given the structure here for specifically for SQL Server. So if you are using any other database like Postgres or Oracle, you need to use the proper syntax in order to create these tables as well as the sequence. So the code what I am writing today is specifically for SQL Server. For other database, you need to make little adjustments depending on the database that you are using. Now, when we have to use post method and what is the purpose? So normally, generally, but it is not a mandatory that we should use post method whenever you want to insert a resource. Okay, so there is a lot of confusion between this post method and put method. So I'll be talking about the differences in the next session on put method. But here, post method is normally used whenever you want to insert a resource. So post is not idempotent. Okay, it's little difficult to pronounce it, but it's idempotent. Now, what it is? So not idempotent means when you invoke the same post request n times, you will have n new resources on the server. That means whenever you call a post method, it has to insert a record. It will insert a new record in the table. Okay, so you have to use post method whenever you want to insert the record. Now let's get into the code on how to develop this particular API. So as always, so I'll be using Visual Code to develop this particular code here. So I have taken the same code which we left out in the last session. So now I'm going to modify this to implement the post method. So first we need to import some additional libraries here, libraries and classes. So one is the request object from Flask. So from Flask import request. So this is a request is used whenever you are sending the request. So that request is encapsulated in this request object. So we can use this to read the parameters which are passed as part of the request, and then we need to import PyODBC. So this is to use the ODBC connections to connect to the database. So in my system, for my system, since I'm using SQL Server, I already have connections here, which I'm going to use it directly. So let me explain what this connection string is all about. First is the driver, where you need to mention the type of the database driver that you are using to connect. So depending on your database, you need to change this driver. So for SQL Server, it is SQL space server. Okay. Then the server name where the database is installed. Since it is on my local machine, I have given as localhost. Then this is the database students underscore DB, database name, the user ID, and then the password. Okay. So once we have the connection string, then we'll going to create the API, a tab.root. So here, since I'm going to add the student here, so I'll just give my API name as add student, and this is the method post. Next, we'll be having a function. So again, I'm giving add student. So first, what we need to do is let me show you the structure of the database which we just saw. So this is having 5 tables: student ID, which is a numeric number field and a primary key. Then we have first name, last name, date of birth, it's number field. It takes the Unix time as the input. Then standard, that is first standard, second standard, or third standard, and then the section, whether it is A, B, C, D, like that. And this is the sequence which will be used for this student ID. Now, if you don't know what a sequence is, a sequence gives you, whenever you call for the next value, it gives the current value plus 1. So the current value will be stored in the sequence. When you say next value, it gives the next value. Now here, if you see create sequence, I have started with 1 and it increments by 1. So that means first time when you call for the sequence, it gives you 1, and then thereafter every time it gives us the increments by 1 value. So whenever you call the sequence, it gives us a new number which shall be incremented based on what is the increment value you have given. So next is, so what we are going to do is we'll be declaring the variables first for the first name, last name. So I'll just use the same field name so it will be easy. Okay, it is S first name, S last name, S standard, and S section. I will assign everything to empty string. Then date of birth as -1. So first what we need to do is we need to read the request object and read the values for these particular uh, fields, and then assign the value to that respective variable. So if S first name in request.json, then Its first name is equal to request dot JSON of yes first name. So what we are doing, we are checking if there is a property called s first name in the JSON data. If it is there, then we are reading that value and assigning to the variable. So similarly, we have to do the same thing for all other variables. So after first name, then last name, standard. So you have to be very careful whenever you are doing copy paste, even though it is a very useful tool. So sometimes it may lead to some silly mistakes, which may take a lot of time to fix the issues. So lastly, it is the data. Okay. So now we read all the values. So here I am not checking if any of these fields are uh, not available, because if you see the table, all the fields are not done. That means for all the fields, we need to give the data. So that you can take as a part of the assignment, where if any of these parameters or property is not part of your JSON data, then we can return an error message. So once we read all the things, then I'm going to declare a list, and I'm going to append all these values to the list. Append, so first name, now one thing you need to keep in mind is when you are appending the fields to the list. So why we are creating this list is because these are the arguments which will be passing to the insert statement, and the care to be taken that the fields that you add should be in the same order that you are using in the query. Okay. So if there is a difference of values, either your query may not work or you will have wrong data in the wrong field. So last name, then date of birth, then standard and section. So once we do all that, let's form the query. So I've already written the query here because it's a bit long. So just copy paste it here and I will explain you the query. So this is the query which we are going to insert the record. You can see insert into table name. Then these are the fields. So student ID, first name, last name, date of birth, standard, section. And here this is the syntax for getting the next value for the sequence. So next value for. So this will vary from database to database. So according to the database you are using, you need to change this particular um, section of the query to get the sequence value. And this question mark indicates these are the values which we will be passing. Now, the point what I was talking about, that order of these fields should be same in your list. Suppose if you put date of birth as the fourth field and here third field, then you'll be trying to insert string value to the date of birth, but actually it's a number, so your query will not run. So just take care that the order of these fields and the order of these fields should be same. So this is my query. Then what we are going to do is, then comes the database operation. So try. So we'll try to connect to the database first by getting a connection object, that is pyodbc dot connect and connection string. If we are not able to connect to the DB, then it gives an exception. So in case of Python, so the way the exception handling is done by using try except. In many other languages, normally we have try catch, but in Python we are using try expect. So if there is any error during the connection, what we are going to do is we give out a response message saying that there was the DB is down. Execution status 404, reason for failure, database is down, contact admin, return response message. So what we are doing, we are trying to connect to the database. If the database is down, we are returning the JSON data, which is having two property. One is execution status, another one is reason for failure. So execution status is in integer format, and reason for failure is in string format, right? So if you are able to connect to the DB, then we'll be trying to execute the query. Again, try. So it's always a good practice to use try catch whenever you are dealing with the resources, especially with the database or file operations. So if your database is, resources are not available, you get the exception so that you will be able to inform to the calling function or to the end user with the proper message. So it's always better to use try catch or try exception handling in your programming. So first, in order to execute the query, we have to create the cursor object. So that you are creating using connection object dot cursor. So once I have the cursor object, I can execute the query dot execute query string and the parameters list that is in our list object. Now, if you are using a query where you are not passing any argument, so we don't have to pass this list variable. Suppose you just want to select the list of students, okay? So then you don't need to pass the argument. Suppose you want to select the students of a particular section, then we have to pass that argument. So whenever you want to pass the argument, so in the query we are using as question mark, and those arguments are appended to the list, and that list can be passed as an argument to the execute statement. So once we execute, then we need to commit. So this commit we need to call whenever we are trying to change the data, like inserting, updating, or deleting. We need to call commit. If it is select statement, then it is not required. So again, if there is any exception, so we'll be giving a response message with a different error code. So in this case is 405, and my reason for failure is error during query execution, right? Next, return. So if you are able to execute the query, then we'll close the connection and then we'll return the success message. So you have to always keep in mind that whenever you are using the database and whenever you connect to the database, once you are done with your query, we have to always close the connection. Now, why it is required is because there is a the database connection is a resource and there is a limitation for this resource. We cannot have infinite number of connections for any database. In fact, the number of connections are defined in the particular configuration file of the database. So if you don't close the connections and if you keep them open, so after some time the database will not be able to run any queries because the connection objects are not available. So always keep in mind whenever you open a database connection, once you are done with your query execution and everything, close that connection so that the connections will be released so that the other client will be able to connect to the database. So that's it, folks. So we are done with the queries. Now let us check if the query is if the function is working or not. So I'm going to execute this. So run without debugging. So run as a Python. So now my service is going to start. So the recipe service is running. So now if you see the database, I don't have any records here. It is 0. So make sure that whatever the arguments we are giving, so the same argument should be there in your host name. Okay, so it is case sensitive, and you have to exactly give the same property as you mentioned in your request should match with the one which you are looking for in the code. Okay, so now let us send the request and see what will happen. And also make sure you select JSON when you are sending the request because we are the API is expecting JSON data here. So we'll send the request. So the status response is success. So let's see the database. So one record is inserted, right? So let us change some data and see what will happen. Let's give it as test. To So this is the Unix time. If you want to find Unix time of any date and time, you can use the website called Evoke, where you will be able to get the Unix time for any date and time. So I'll change the standard as second instead of first. So let's send the request and see what will happen. Okay, it is success. Now if you see, there should be 2 records because we called it as 2 times post request. So this is what the post is all about. So whenever you call post request, it will be inserting a resource. And as I told, it is not mandatory, but generally this is what we have to follow. We can also use post to even update the data also. But if you follow REST API architecture, post is for inserting the resources. Now let's try to change some database parameter and see if we get the error message. So what I'm going to do is I'll change the password as I'm going to change my password here, and again we will run here. So now you see what is the response that will come. So okay, it's not saved here. Save. Stop debugging. Okay. Without debugging. So you can see execution status 404 came, says database is down, contact admin. So the calling function can read this response and then they can accordingly take action for handling this particular error. So with this, we have done the coding to use PyODBC, and then we implemented PyODBC to connect to the database and execute our queries. We have implemented the post method, and also for exception handling, we can use try except. Okay. And normally post method is used whenever you want to insert the resource. So now let's get back to the PPT here. So as part of the assignment, I would request you to write post API to insert the details of the teachers. So the minimum fields that you can use is the ID, which you can again use as a sequence, or the maximum value plus one, first name, last name, date of birth, and the qualification of the teachers. Okay. And also, as I told, another assignment part you can use in the same post function. If any of the required parameters are not available, then you can at time also you can return an error message and indicating that this particular field is missing. So thank you so much for watching the video. So we are done for today. So if you like this video, do like it, comment, give me the comments how we can improve the program and what are the topics we need to cover. Do share it and also subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed. So thank you so much for watching. So see you again in the next video. So till then, take care. Bye bye. Stay home and stay safe.